Hello, my name is MIKKEL Thorpe. I'm the host of the Expat Money Show, and today I am joined by Swen Lorenz. Swen runs Undervalued Shares, an excellent newsletter speaking about investments all over the world. And today we're going to be discussing European stocks, European equities and markets. So Swen, welcome to the show. Say hello to everyone.
Hi, everyone. And it's great to be here again with you.
My pleasure to have you. So talk to me about European stock markets, because I would think of them as being a rather boring market. And, a lot of the headlines are captured by Facebook and Google and all these tech companies and things like that in the US. What's the situation, the story in Europe?
That's a commonly held misconception.
Okay.
And let's just blow this out of the water right away by giving your audience one figure that I think is going to blow their mind and hopefully yours as well. So you mentioned these tech companies in the States where, of course, everyone knows there's Facebook and there's Google and all that. Since 2015, there have been more tech IPOs in Europe than in the United States.
Really?
Yes, there are more tech unicorns in Europe than in China. And if you had invested into European tech companies in 2015, your returns would have been just as good as with the Nasdaq index.
Okay, interesting.
So, does that get you interested?
It does indeed. It does indeed. So speak to me, I guess, from a country basis. Are we talking just Europe in general and they're just spread out all over Europe? Or are there hotspots in the European markets where a lot of this action is happening?
There are certainly hotspots, but one of the beauties of Europe is that you've got these 28 countries or however many with different languages, different legal systems, different technical ways of trading stocks, which is what makes Europe so interesting, because this is a continent where things are not quite as transparent and straightforward as, for example, in the United States, which is why investors who make an effort to analyze and to dig deeper, they can actually find incredible gems. So this was a long way of saying that, yeah, you're right, there are hotspots like the UK, which is where tech entrepreneurs go. At the same time, you've got surprising smaller countries or even bigger ones. One of my favorite examples is on my website, I analyzed a German software and tech company in 2010, which since then has gone up in value by a factor of 500. And that is one of these European champions that no one would have ever heard of outside of Europe or even Germany, because it's a company that basically does tech and does software in Germany. But, you could have invested into this for an absolute song. It was so undervalued in 2010. And I actually have one reader who's held it all the way.
All the way to the top?
All the way up more than 500 times.
He must be your biggest fan right now.
I think he kind of is, yeah.
Okay, so Germany, that's an excellent example. Now, you also mentioned the UK. Now, is the UK part of Europe?
The UK is certainly part of Europe, because unlike what the mainstream media tries to make you believe, Europe is a continent, it's a landmass. What they always try to refer to is the European Union, which is a political institution, and the UK has decided to leave that political institution. But it's still very much part of the continent, and it is in many ways the most dynamic part of the continent when you look at the number of tech IPOs, the amount of venture capital going into tech investments. But then again, everything has nuances in Europe. And this is why it's so difficult to make these sort of broad statements. For example, when you speak of tech, Europe is very strong in renewable energy, which is also tech. It's not social media and it's not none of that stuff. But the Germans are just really good at renewable energy. And again, with renewable energy companies, whatever you think of the theme, and they obviously, it's a politicized subject, you could have made huge amounts of money in that sector. And for that, you had to go to Europe, specifically to Germany. So it's a very broad mixture of opportunities to pick from, and you need research and you need, diligence.
And how is the energy going in Germany? Because I know from my own research, we were getting rid of all nuclear power and everything was supposed to go green. How is that going?
Don't even get me started.
I like to wind Sven up sometimes, so this is really good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm of German origin, although I left the country 23 years ago. In 2011, they made the political decision in light of the Fukushima nuclear power disaster or catastrophe to switch off all German nuclear power by 2022. And
it's coming up fast.
That's coming up fast. And they, their pipe dreams when it came to replacing everything with renewable energy has been just that, a pipe dream. They've had incredible success with renewable energy. As a nation, they really like it. There are all sorts of arguments in favor of it, etc., etc. But they just didn't succeed sufficiently in replacing the existing energy infrastructure with it. And again, now you have some of the world's highest energy prices in Europe. And there are all sorts of opportunities coming out of it, because much as they're, going to switch off or planning to switch off their nuclear energy plants now, they need to get energy from somewhere. And there is business to be made doing so. And they're desperate.
So where is it going to come from? Russia through Ukraine? And
in that case, and that is one of my favorite subjects, I have to admit, I have been writing about Russian energy sources, and specifically Gazprom, the largest gas company in the world, which supplies energy to Europe, among other places. I've been writing about them for 2.5 years, and I started writing about Gazprom stock when no one wanted to hear about it. And it was an insane bargain at the time. And the market has now recognized that, and my readers are sitting very pretty with that investment. And again, it's showing the connectivity of all these different countries in Europe, and how if one country makes some really bad decisions, another country can reap billions in profits from that. And I'm here to find these opportunities early on. That's what I love doing.
So looking at the larger trends across Europe, across the marketplace, these political decisions, and a lot of this, is publicity and a lot of virtue signaling and a lot of wishful thinking and hope, and maybe good, maybe bad. I'm not here to say, but it does provide opportunities on the other side.
Yes, and on a very positive note, one also has to give the Europeans huge credit for doing some things extraordinarily well.
Okay.
And you will have probably seen recently that, at least for some time, the world's richest man came from France. You and I think of France as a socialist.
Yeah.
we shall not use these words online, but France is very good at luxury goods.
True.
They have these heritage brands, centuries of history. No one can replicate that in the world, and it's France. It comes with a certain, champagne and handbags and all that. And there is one entrepreneur in France, Bernard Arnault, who started buying up French luxury goods companies in the 1980s.
Yes.
And he's been compounding ever since. And that's what he always said, that, as the world gets richer, more people will want to buy French luxury goods. And at least temporarily, earlier this year, he was number one on the world's rich list, ahead of Jeff Bezos, ahead of Elon Musk. I mean, they're they're constantly switching places there. His company is worth 400 billion. If you had invested into it in the 80s, in the 90s, in the 2000s, it made for a stunning growth investment.
Wow.
And they own this space. This is a company that has a huge moat. No one can come up with these heritage brands you can't just set them up. And there's a driven entrepreneur who's made bucket loads of money for his shareholders.
Amazing. So what about some of the other countries, like Switzerland, for example? Off air, we were kind of chit-chatting about Swiss equities. What's your opinion on the markets in that country?
So I love Switzerland because it is, as a country, extraordinarily international, and that applies to its companies as well.
Okay.
It is such a small market. Swiss companies for over 100 years, if not much longer, have had to expand abroad and internationally to become thriving businesses. And off the top of my head, I think Nestle does 97% of its revenue outside of Switzerland.
That would make sense.
Something like that, which is an extraordinary figure. And so if you look at the Standard & Poor's 500 index in the United States, the companies included in the S&P 500 do 70% of their business in the United States, which means they are a great proxy for investing in the United States. But if you want international exposure to growth markets such as Asia, or even Africa has a massively growing middle class now.
Yep. And Nestle products are all over. I know. I've traveled. I've seen them. on the streets, which is amazing.
Yeah.
The actual amount of brands that Nestle holds under its umbrella are unbelievable. Even things like Nespresso comes from Nestle, which I am a huge espresso drinker. I have 2 or 3 espressos a day, and Swiss. It's amazing.
And it's almost like an investment fund. If you buy Nestle stock, you co-own a company in Switzerland, which is one of the safest countries in the world. And it's an investment that is geared towards benefiting from the growing world economy, from emerging markets, and they tend to grow faster than the world economy because as consumers get richer, when they rise basically from the bottom and they become middle class, they invest or spend a lot more of their money on consumer goods.
Yep.
And Nestle is the play for that.
Well, I'll tell you from a personal side as well. We just had our second child, and our second child takes formula. Well, when you go and buy formula, and we're looking for the nicest brands, and you see it on every grocery store shelf. Nestle makes all types of milk powders and formula powders and baby products as well. So if you're looking at any type of play in the population growing in the world, and more people entering the middle class, I wouldn't say it's a premium brand in this space, but it is certainly not a cheap brand. So there's so many different plays on something like Nestle.
And a lot of hidden themes and hidden sectors that most people don't even know exist. For example, European healthcare companies, pharmaceutical companies and consumer health products. That European sector does 40% of its business in the United States.
Okay.
Who would have thought?
Yep.
And in the day and age of COVID and spending more money on healthcare, et cetera, there's some incredible companies to be exploited. One more example, if I may.
Please, absolutely.
From Germany, from my fatherland, even though I left many years ago. It's a company called Sartorius, which is a German former small, medium-sized enterprise specialized in laboratory instruments.
Okay. So lab work and blood tests and...
Yeah. And over the last 15 years, the stock is up 600 times. And I think pretty much only Tesla stock and a few others have outperformed it over the last 10 years or something like that.
Well, that's amazing. And you don't hear it on the talking heads every day. And
as I said, this is exactly what I try to dig out and, have very occasionally managed to find in the past, working hard to find more of these examples. And they exist in Europe, and you have a much higher chance of hitting something like that in Europe because the markets are under-analyzed. They're not very transparent. The amount of equity research in Europe has gone down dramatically in the last couple of years because of new regulation. Europeans have made it much harder for banks to publish investment research and equity research. So suddenly there's less research, and
so it has to be done from independent sources like your work.
Yeah, and we benefit from that.
Okay. Now, what about things like Scandinavia or Estonia? I mean, that's really getting known as a tech hub, to kind of circle back to what we were speaking at the beginning of this conversation. Any insights on these parts of the world?
Absolutely. That started, I think, around 2004. Estonia became famous as the country where Skype originated. Back in the days when people used Skype, which was...
What's that again?
Replaced by WhatsApp and others in the meantime. But the Nordics, and this is like a broad section. I mean, the Baltics are kind of like Eastern Europe, but sort of in the Nordics as well. It's let's just speak broadly of the Nordics. They're very good at tech, software. There's some surprising companies there, for example, also in gaming. And because these tend to be small countries with a relatively limited pool of local investors, huge language barriers, because, I mean, let's be honest, who speaks Swedish, who speaks Norwegian,
or
Finnish,
Lithuanian, or Latvian, or these types of other.
And these markets used to be a bit difficult to access for equity investors. Lots of bargains to be found there, and genuine, very exciting growth companies. This is a highly educated workforce that we've got there. And again, like Switzerland, for them, it's natural to look beyond the boundaries of their own country, because if you have such a small local audience, it's natural for you to expand abroad.
Okay, amazing. Well, Sven, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time to speak to us today about European equities. If you guys want to find out more about what Sven does, he's actually prepared a special report for you and you can grab it for free. I'm going to have the link underneath this video so you can go there. But basically it is expatmoneyshow.com/undervalued. It's going to redirect you to the page and you're going to be able to pick up that special report for free. I'm a big fan of your work. I really like the special reports you do. There is so much more to discuss. And I think, there's so many interesting stories around the world that, I really encourage people to look, outside of just your backyard. The world is a very, very big place. So Sven, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with my audience today.
Thanks. Pleasure to be here.